silly is that?
Pulls off three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
Hello. Welcome back to the Hoop Junkie Podcast, the number one sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach. I'm joined, as always, by the one and only playoff-ready man himself, Chance Baker. How you doing, Chance?
Man, I'm doing great. It's the best time of year. Playoffs kicking off this weekend. I can't wait. It's exciting, man.
Man, I know, I'm so pumped, it's crazy. Neither one of us are at our own homes right now, and yet we have moved all of our podcasting gear to discrete locations.
If it was any other day would probably be like, oh, let's record another time. But it's like playoffs are starting. We just couldn't help it. We just had to take the laptops up and start recording. So we're ready for it.
Well, you think about it, man, because we're gonna get to the off season and we're gonna be like, man, we just finding stuff to talk about. So now you got to take advantage of all these games going on.
Once we get to the summer, it's going to be like, all right, let's watch this hardwood classic game from '96 together and do a podcast rewatch or something. Like, we'll be struggling, but for now, we've got plenty of content to talk about for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you a believer. We're gonna rewatch the whole 2006 NBA Finals, and you tell me how rigged it was.
I don't know if you want to do that to yourself, man. I think we could come up with better stuff to spend our time. I don't know if you want to go through that misery.
No, I don't. No, I've already had enough time spent with my therapist over it, so we're good on that. Well, look, Chance. So looks like, let me sit here and look at the score update. So to all of our junkies out there, we are actually recording this right now with a minute 33 left in the Chicago-Miami game, and it is going back and forth now. So
Heat
now,
up by 3. Yep.
The Heat are up by 3. So we'll check back on that, and we'll have the results on that, and we'll kind of give our overview on that based off of who wins that game. But Chance, we did have some playoff games, and I do want to say something.
We did.
I told you about them Oklahoma City Thunder. I tried to tell you, Chance.
You did.
I gave you a chance to hop up on the bandwagon.
You did. Hey, I told you I was rooting for him. I hopped on the bandwagon as a fan, but I didn't think they had it in them. But yeah, man, that was just an unbelievable performance. They did what they've been doing all year. Josh Giddey, I mean, how do you not start with him? That guy, I've been a fan of him. And it honestly, it hurts my soul a little bit because if you remember, the Grizzlies traded up to 10 that year. And all of the reports over the summer was that we were like looking at Josh Giddey and that, he was the number one guy on our radar. Of course, he ends up going, 7th, I think, instead. And so I fully expected him to be there. So I watched a lot of his highlight reels over that summer, and I was all excited. It's like this could be our, bench playmaker. And then, of course, he has a few spots ahead of us. And, just seeing him drop nearly a 30-point triple-double in a play-in game,
right,
which is unfortunate that stat will be lost in the abyss somewhere. I don't know where they put those play-in stats. I think that's another conversation for another day. But, yeah, unbelievable performance. Huge shots by Shea at the end. It was – I'd say 3 out of 4 of the play-in games were really entertaining this week so far.
They were. And, man, Lou Dort balled out in that game too, man.
Yeah.
He got him off to a hot start. Man, this really showed we shouldn't talk about the Thunder side of things before we move on to I think we got a little mess in New Orleans brewing from this. But before we move on to that, man, this really shows like the Thunder are for real. You think about them going and getting Chet Holmgren this offseason, and then they still got this huge collection of picks. Man, this Thunder team, I would not be surprised if, what's the year, 2024 when they've got all those picks? I wouldn't be surprised if that's the year they make a big move as far as packaging up all their picks and going out and building around this young core that they have. Because, dude, I think they really put the world on notice because the casual fan out there really didn't know that this Thunder team, that all these guys had game like that, man. So shout out to them, man.
Yeah, doing it without Chet and Yeah, I can't wait to see how they look next year, and I do. So they'll be playing. For those listening, obviously the game will be over at this point, but for us, they'll be tipping off here in a few minutes against the Timberwolves, and I really hope they do it again. You picked them to win both play-in games and make the playoffs. I hope they do. I think that a playoff experience, even if you go and get swept by Denver 4-0, I think getting that experience would be extremely beneficial. We saw that with Memphis a
Hmm.
couple years ago when they played the Jazz. They actually stole game one in that series, but got blown out basically the next four. But that playoff experience for a young team like OKC would be really, really valuable for them. So I really hope they do end up winning tonight and sneak into that last spot. I think it'd be very entertaining for sure.
Hmm. So then let's spend a little bit more time talking about the Pelicans, Chance. So obviously, it their season did not go how they expected it to go. Right, this team at one point was a leading contender in the Western Conference, and then
I remember once upon a time when me and you both picked them to win 50 plus games and be
yeah.
a potential finals contender. And to be fair, who could have seen Zion getting hurt? That never happens. We never would have expected that. So no way
well,
we should have known better in that aspect.
Well, when you look at it too, Chance, like I was sitting there, I was texting a buddy that works for the Grizzlies, and I was talking to him, and I was like, man, it's kind of crazy when you sit and look at the whole Zion situation, because no one would have expected his career to be what it has been. And I mean that in a positive way and also in a negative way, because when you look at Zion's career, when he plays, Zion is hands down one of the best players in the NBA when he plays. He's honestly he puts up stats that we haven't seen anybody put up since Shaquille O'Neal. When you look at his scoring efficiency in the post, I think like in the post he's pretty much automatic. Like what, shooting 60 something percent from the field. He's dominant, especially for someone to only be what 6'6".
Right.
He's unstoppable force. But the issue is can Zion stay healthy? That's always been a concern with him. And then we talk about like the things like with his weight, that being a concern. You saw that the Benson family, like they put a big weight clause in his agreement, saying that Zion he has like seven weigh-ins in the year, I believe, that he has to do. No other NBA player has a clause like that in their contract.
Right.
Where
It's kind of
where
like the Kyler Murray clause with Arizona, where they're like, you have to watch film this many times. Like, if
right,
they even thought about putting that in a professional player's contract, like that's just not a good sign.
man, it's not. It's a concern. And then when you look at all of his peers, you look at Ja, Luca, Tatum, uh, all of those guys that are in that range with him, Devin Booker, all those young guys. Think about it. Like we've seen playoff moments from them in multiple years. Like we can sit here and talk
Hmm.
about Tatum making it all the way to the finals. Talk about Luca making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. You talk about Ja make going into the play in, then going into the playoffs, and then back to back years. And then all of these guys are making a name for themselves in the playoffs. Trae Young, but Zion has yet to play not even one game. Chance, like
Yep.
and so I do pump the brakes. I'm not one of those guys who are sitting there from a pessimistic point of view saying, "Oh, I think that the Pelicans need to trade Zion." They're not at that point yet, but they definitely are at a point of okay. These are legitimate concerns that we do need to recognize, and I
Hmm.
know you saw also what C.J. McCollum has said in
Yes.
in one of his post game pressers. I think that was like to me it was one of those things where it was like what he said was quiet, but it was real loud.
Hmm. Oh
you
yeah.
know.
I mean, coming from McCollum, a guy that's one of the top players association, was he the VP of the Players Association? Like his voice carries a lot of weight, and so for
Mhm.
him to make those comments, that's when it's serious. And yeah, it sounds. And what stemmed from that is the reports where Zion is basically saying like he's healthy. It's just more of a mental thing. And so now like when you've got a when as a Pelican teammate, when you're going out giving it your all every night, and you've got Zion who appears that he might be healthy, and again, like we don't know the full extent of this,
Right.
of course, but when it appears that, he might be healthy and ready to go. And for all they know, he's out there, putting down 360s in practice, but, he's just not ready to play yet. And so I could see where that would be really frustrating because he's such a difference maker. As you mentioned, when he's on the court, he is just an elite talent, both finishing around the rim and, just his explosiveness. So not having someone like that, I mean, that's why you end up getting bounced in the first round of the play-in to a young and inexperienced Thunder team. So they need him to figure it out. They need him to get healthy. But I mean, you can still be optimistic too. I remember once upon a time when Joel Embiid was a bust, right? Because he played, hardly any games his first 3 seasons in the league, and now he's a potential MVP and scoring 33 points per game. So there's still time to turn it around, but it all comes down to taking your body seriously, taking the game seriously. Not to say that he's not doing that, but it's just a reoccurring theme with him every single year where these soft tissue injuries are coming up. So I definitely hope he's able to turn this around. I think the Zion thing will be something that we could watch for years to come. The 1-2 from that draft. So I hope he turns it around and is able to stay healthy because that Pelicans team can be scary, but when they don't have him, you see what happens. Even with the other talent around them, it's just hard to win without a guy like that.
And Chance, this was, in hearing him talk about his mental health, this was something too that raised my eyebrow because over the past couple years, how many NBA players have we heard say something about their mental health over the past few years? Like
Right.
you saw the reports about Giannis saying that
Hmm.
he debated retirement. You saw Luka a
Right.
few weeks ago saying that his mental wasn't right. You saw when John Morant was going through his situation, talking about how he needed therapy. Um,
Hmm.
and you sit here and I think about all of the biggest stars at some point have been very vocal about their mental health and about how the things that they've been struggling with. Do you think that this is something that's new, or players are just being more open about it these days?
I think part of it is it's 2023 and mental health is a lot more accepted now. Like when you look back, to the 90s and early 2000s, when you hear like mental health or someone going to a therapist, like, oh, something's wrong with him, he's going to a therapist. Whereas now, like, it's a very normalized thing, which is a very good thing. I'm a big advocate of mental health and using all the resources that are available for you. So I think, in my honest opinion, it is just the fact that you are able to be more open about it and, it's not looked on as a bad thing. Whereas in the past, if Michael Jordan came out and said he, was having issues with mental health, he would have been looked at a lot differently back then. Not saying
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing because like I said, I do agree that, we should be addressing that. So I think that is a big part of it. There are some gray areas, like when, Ben Simmons is sitting out and saying it's mental health. If you ask me my personal opinion, I would say that he might have been using that one, but I don't want to just, pick and choose when mental health, so I'm always going to side with the players and say that, it seems like they have mental health issues, like they should take care of that. And you look at a guy like Zion, like he's been, the star of the show, spotlight ever since he was first in the league. And so I do understand where, that could be coming with a lot of pressure and something that he needs to deal with for sure.
All right, so we had some technical difficulties right in the middle of my Zion rant, but going to pick up where I left off. So basically, what I was saying before my computer froze because we're trying this in different areas. But really, so on the mental health thing with Zion, he's been in the spotlight since he was what? When did you first hear about Zion? When he was like 14 years old, 13 years old?
Yeah, high school, middle
Yeah.
school, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do think that the mental health aspect definitely weighs in a lot, especially like in the age of social media where guys finish their game and they get straight in the locker room and check their phone and they've got, thousands of mentions, if they missed a big shot telling them how much they cost them money and their gambling bets, so they ruin their night because their favorite team lost. So I do think that like a lot of it takes a toll. And so I do, respect the fact that players are more open about it, and hopefully the NBA continues to provide resources to help with that on that side of it.
Well, man, you got to think about it too. Like, dude, we live in a world where you now can't run from media for anything. Like I remember hearing stories like after the 2007 We Believe Warriors beat the Mavs, and how Dirk just went to Australia and just unplugged and all this type of stuff, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
nowadays you can do that, but it's so hard to truly unplug from everything. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
because these doggone devices that we have
Yep.
in our pockets, like you get notifications for everything. Like and even in the like even in the playoffs, like if you're subscribed to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever, like they still send some sports updates on certain things, and
Hmm.
so you're constantly always going to hear about it. And then even if even if you've got a flip phone and you're unplugged, but these people got wives and girlfriends and mothers and brothers and cousins and all these people and all these family members that are seeing this stuff all the time, you know? So
Yep.
like, so I commend these athletes now when we start talking about like, and then we talking about like the weight issue. Yeah, Zion's weight is a problem. Like there's no denying that. But like we talked about last week about how people take stuff too far and start fat shaming these players. Like I could imagine how that could be tough on Zion. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you're in a situation where you keep tearing your hamstring, and it's honestly that's you can't. It's the hardest part is losing weight when you can't walk.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's an extremely hard thing to do. It requires a extremely disciplined diet. Now, granted, he
Hmm.
is a professional athlete, and that's what makes professional athletes so great is because of their determination and their work ethic to get through those type of things. That's what makes them pros, and that's what separates them. But the thing is, with the Zion thing and Giannis and all these guys who have came out and said stuff about their mental health, man, I get it. I know it's got to be tougher than it's ever been because Jordan Jordan used to go to the casino and gamble and drink and smoke and all this type of stuff, and nobody would even hear about it, right? But
Right.
you end up in a situation where, even though the John Morant stuff was self inflicted,
Hmm.
but 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 there wasn't even a option for that to even really be a thing back in the day
Right.
with some of
Right.
those players. So they just never dealt with that. So shout out to those guys for being honest about it. And I just really hope that it sends a bigger message out there to people like, hey, no matter how much money you have, matter how many posters you're on, and how many jersey sales you've got, that mental health is a real thing that you got to make sure you take care of. I mean, I've been to therapy before, and I didn't think it was
Right.
something and I didn't think it'd be something I enjoyed. But man, it was something that really that really got me through some tough times, and I recommend it to anybody. I need to get to the point to where I'm doing it more regularly. That needs to be a thing for me because I think it's the same way. Just like you go to the gym to work on your body, I think you should do things to work on your mind. I
Yep.
think that's a big thing.
100%.
So anyway, so enough of that game. So what other game? It was who else played? Lakers, Minnesota. Um,
Yep. So
the
that was a crazy game. That honestly, going
the
to that
Lakers
game,
had
that
no
just
business
reminded
winning.
me. That game reminded me so much. It was so reminiscent of the Timberwolves Grizzlies series from last year. If you remember, Grizzlies 1-6. Only one of those wins was a dominant fashion. The other four wins that the Grizzlies had was literally, or the other three wins, I'm sorry, it was literally them going down 20 in the first half, sometimes being down 20 going into the fourth quarter, and the Timberwolves just completely forget how to play and Grizzlies coming back. That's exactly what the Lakers did. I mean, the Timberwolves like hardly scored in the last 8 minutes of the game and overtime. And I saw a stat where I don't think they scored a point in the paint for like the last like 13 minutes of
Mm-hmm.
regulation. It was just absolutely insane. And curious to know your thoughts. I know you were watching this game as well. Like, what do you think is
Right,
wrong? Like, what happens to the Timberwolves to put them in this position?
man. They at this point they have a resume and a history of doing this. So when you sit here and you think about this, all this stuff has been happening under Chris Finch. At a certain point, coaches got to be held accountable for that because obviously, we can sit here and talk about the players because the players on the court and obviously they have the most control in the situation, but when you keep having this consistent issue of your team going up big in moments that matter and then them faltering away, it's definitely something that I would be looking into the offseason at my coaching and my coaching staff and wondering like, hey, are these the right guys to take us to the next level? That would be
Right.
my first assessment that I would have to make with this team.
Oh yeah, I mean, because you could see such a difference the first two and a half, 3 quarters where they're just moving the ball, the offense looks crisp, they're cutting, and all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, and I actually noticed there was one spot where they showed Chris Finch on the sideline, and you could read his lips, and he was like, "We have to move the ball." And yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say that, but actually getting your team to do that and implement that, because it's like you get to the fourth quarter and it's Anthony Edwards just dribbling around, and Edwards had an absolutely horrible game. I'm not ready to write him off as someone that isn't ready for the moment, because I did see him have some absolutely insane games against the Grizzlies last year, but he was off in that game
They're
completely, and
saying
that
this is
really hurt their
elbow.
offense.
They're saying this is
Yeah.
elbow chance.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So and he had the black strap on across his shoulder and his arm, and so you could tell something was off. And yeah, I don't see Edwards having many more games like that. They're about to tip off here in a moment, and I definitely expect him to bounce back if he's healthy enough to do so, because he's just a competitor and he's not going to go down that way. At least I wouldn't think. But when it gets to that point, your star player is off. You've got to figure out other ways. You've got to get them easy looks. You've got to move the ball, and they were just completely stagnant on offense. And the Lakers, they stole one. They even, almost gave it back with a foul at the end on Anthony Davis, the brain fart, as
Man,
LeBron called it.
man, AD has done that a couple times in the
Yeah,
past couple of years, man, fouling
he
people
has
and at
in
the
big
end of
games.
games when you don't need a foul, man. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I'm surprised I hadn't seen a compilation of that yet from someone.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's one out there, but that's not the first time I've seen him do that. But then honestly, Chance, the Lakers had zero business winning that game. The Lakers,
Oh, yeah.
uh, for a good chunk of that game just looked sloppy. Even LeBron was turning the ball over on several different occasions. Where going into that game, I thought it would be I was hammering the Lakers hard. I was like, yeah, Lakers are going to walk away with this game. And then I honestly even liked the Lakers going into the Grizzlies matchup. But after watching that game, man, it raised a lot of doubts for me with that team. However, you try not to I don't want to overreact over one game. But you sit here and look at it. LeBron had 5 turnovers. Anthony Davis had 5 turnovers. Austin Reeves had 3 turnovers. D'Angelo Russell only had 2 points in that game. 1 of 9 from the field, 0 of 4 from three. Like this game was a ugly game that the Timberwolves had, especially when you had Karl Anthony Towns. The Lakers had zero answer for him. At one point, Karl Anthony Towns was on the court and hadn't missed a shot,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you sit there and you look at that team, the Timberwolves blew that game just as much as, well, I wouldn't even say just as much as, I think even more so than the Lakers actually winning that game. I think the Lakers got a gift in
Mm-hmm.
that game, but kudos to them, because at the end of the day, is in this play-in and playoff environment, it's called survive in advance. That's all it is.
It is. Yep. And I think to the Timberwolves too, as you mentioned, Towns was absolutely dominant, and they've got to get him more involved. He's got to stop picking up the silly fouls. He kind of has the Jaren Jackson syndrome in big games. I saw that in their series last year as well, where it's just silly ticky tack fouls, because he's got to be on the court. I'm looking at their box score. Towns was plus 18. He was the only
Mm-hmm.
player on the Timberwolves with a positive plus minus on the entire team. And I'm not one that thinks plus minus is the end all be all, but that's a pretty clear contrast between him and everybody else on the court, where he's just
Right.
so clearly the number one option, especially on a night where Edwards is struggling and he only gets 12 shot attempts. Like, you've got to feed him the ball. He's got to demand the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll be tipping off here soon. Within the next, actually, they just tipped off here for us, so we'll see if he's able to get going, against the Thunder. But yeah, he's got to be more assertive and get more shots, because he's eventually it'll be Edwards, but right now Towns is still the number one option, and he's got to play like that.
Right. You got Rudy Gobert back too now
Yep.
for them tonight. So I mean we'll see how that whole thing goes. Now, so Chance, the Bulls Raptors, I'm sorry, not Bulls Raptors, Bulls Heat just finished up, and the Heat ended up closing out that game 102
Yep.
91 actually.
Yep.
So that
They went
that
on a
is
big run towards the end.
yeah, so they wrapped it up. So that's what I expected. But you know what? Shout out to the Bulls, man. The Bulls actually gave a bigger fight to the Heat than I thought. The Heat actually have not done what even though they won tonight, um, they haven't looked as what I thought they would have so far in the series. I thought they would have won that first play-in game
Hmm.
against Atlanta, but Atlanta came out firing on all cylinders.
Oh
Chance.
yeah, they did. That one
Uh,
was never even close.
It wasn't close at all. I mean, it's to the point to where I mean, I really don't even want to waste time covering it too much because it was a lot of other good basketball to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, every playing game so far has been good except that one. It was just one of those where Atlanta jumps on them from the beginning, and they actually showed great, resilience too. There were a couple runs where the Heat, made a run, get it to 5 or 7, and then the Hawks just go back. And I mean, it was one story to that game, and it was offensive rebounding. They were just absolutely dominating the Heat, down low.
Hmm.
And I just feel like every single shot they put up, if they missed it, they were getting the rebound. Congo was just absolutely dominant down low, and Capella as well. What do you have, like 46 rebounds, 47 rebounds total.
He had
Pretty
20. He had
close to it.
21. He had 21
21.
rebounds.
It was close. I thought he broke a record for a minute, but yeah, he was just
Hmm.
absolutely amazing in that game. So yeah, not much more to say about that one. But yeah, it looks like we'll be within the next couple hours. The playoff seeds will finally be set. We've got all but one. It comes down to the Thunder Timberwolves, and then we'll have the matchups, and tomorrow the fun begins.
Oh man, yeah, I'm super excited. So now, Chance, so another team that has been eliminated are the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors, Chance, is a team that they got a lot of decisions to make over this offseason.
They do. Yep.
We talked about them a lot at the trade deadline. We were like, hey, the trade deadline starts and ends with Toronto, right? We kept saying that. It was everything was going to Toronto. And then Toronto, they ended up being buyers at the trade deadline for Jakob Pertl. And now
Hmm.
he's a free agent. You got Nick Nurse, kind of if he's coming back or not. We don't know. We don't know what that situation is with him.
Well, sorry, guys. We got to end the pod here early. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties all throughout this video. Well, we hope you enjoyed our playoff preview as much as we gave you. We'll try to give a little bit of more of a recap of what you missed on the next pod. All right, until next time, peace.